We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, and I'm a partnerships manager here at AllVoices, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today, I'm really excited to welcome our next guest, Olivia Owens. She is the creator and general manager of IFundWomen of Color. Olivia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really, really great. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for being on. If you want to start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your pronouns, and this could be literally anything, what has recently brought you joy?
Amazing. Well, my name, as you mentioned, is Olivia Owens. I'm the creator and general manager of IFundWomen of Color, pronouns she, her, hers. And IFundWomen is a funding marketplace for women-owned businesses and the people who want to support them. And in January of 2020, I launched IFundWomen of Color, which is a platform dedicated to advancing BIPOC entrepreneurs by providing access to the capital, coaching, and connections women of color specifically need to launch and grow successful businesses. And we can dig into kind of the nuances there as we move forward in the conversation. But in terms of something that has recently brought me joy, it's definitely been human interaction. Being able to see
Yes.
friends that I haven't seen in so long, being able to hug people and share space. It's just something that I don't think will ever be taken for granted again, and excited to be able to do that safely.
Yes, absolutely. I know we were just discussing that I was in Prospect Park over the weekend, and even though I was a party of one, it was nice to see different pockets of people gathering in groups. So that's definitely a great answer. I would love to dive in a little bit more to IFundWomen of Color, and how do you think your personal journey has really led you to this point and found and lead this segment of the business?
Sure. So I got my degree in journalism, had dreams of working at a magazine in New York City. And as I was going through school, the death of print was happening. And so I needed to find a new dream to attach to. And after I graduated, I landed at Under Armour in a temp position in their HR benefits department, and had no idea what I was doing there. Really was just an amazing company to start my career off at. But ultimately, I could feel that there wasn't that passion for what I was doing. I was spending a lot of hours working, putting my all into something that just ultimately wasn't serving me. And so after 3 years, I decided to make the move to New York. Fortunately, my brother lived here, so I had a place to stay while I figured it out. But really, when I made that choice, I didn't move to New York for a specific job title or a specific company. What was most important to me was that I was getting fulfillment out of the work that I was doing. And so I have learned that kind of my personal mission in life is to help people become a better version of themselves.
Yeah.
I do that in my friendships. I do that now in my work, but really it was just like, I'm just looking for something that would give me the opportunity to make that happen. And that left it wide open for what that could be. And so I was introduced to Karen Khan, the founder and CEO of IFundWomen. They were in their first year of business, just the co-founders, and they needed somebody to take over social media for them. So I knew that I wanted to get into some type of marketing. And so I started doing freelance, ultimately became the marketing manager, and pretty immediately started coaching entrepreneurs on how to crowdfund. The problem that we're looking to solve at iFundWomen is there's a massive funding gap for women founders.
Mhm.
Women only receive 2.6% of venture capital dollars, and Black and Latinx founders only represent 0.64% of that, less than 3%. And so we are focused on alternative funding sources that help get capital into the hands of women entrepreneurs. And over the first 3 years, we were doing the work, we were doing the educating, we were supporting entrepreneurs and coaching them. And we took a look at the data and recognized that while women of color represented about 70% of our community, they only represented about 30% of the funds being raised. And we pretty quickly said, not on our watch. Like, this is our
Yeah.
platform. We have the opportunity to do something about this. And I also had the anecdotal insights to understand that, like, when I'm coaching women of color entrepreneurs, I can clearly see the deeper hesitation
Right.
when it comes to crowdfunding. you need a network. So if you don't feel like you have a network you can turn to and ask for money, it can feel like an inaccessible tool. And then you also need to leverage vulnerability, which is not a muscle that we often have the luxury to flex. We're typically told to put our heads down, grind it out, work really hard, but crowdfunding forces you to put your vision out there and ask for people to believe in it. And so recognizing those two pain points, I created IFundWomen of Color to create a space where we can leverage each other to push our businesses forward faster. I think there's this scarcity myth around like, oh, well, she's already doing this, how could I do it? And it's like, no, we don't need to be cutting ourselves out. Systemically, we are already shut out in so many different ways that we don't need to be doing it to ourselves. And then also just creating space to have those vulnerable conversations, to share what we don't know, ask the quote unquote dumb question, so that when we go into the rooms where opportunity lives, we can present our best selves. And so it was a journey in kind of being the first hire on the team, and then being really passionate about creating tools and resources that are specific to the needs of women of color, that I found myself in this place.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love the mission, and definitely think there is a need in the market for something like this. As you said, there's differentiated resources, and where you're coming from, the quote unquote friends and family around is not the same for everyone, especially women of color as well. And I know you mentioned a lot of the tools in terms of community and coaching, and it's not only a route to alternative sources of funding, which is super important. Can you tell us a little bit more about the tools that IFundWomen of Color offers to founders?
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, we were able to launch IFundWomen of Color in partnership with Caress, who is our founding partner. They did a $1 million investment into the platform. And I think if you're looking to support women of color entrepreneurs, do so with your dollars. And so proud to have Caress as a partner in that. And so of course, we had dreams for how that money was going to be leveraged, and then COVID hit. And so we quickly pivoted to COVID-19 relief grants. And so we're able to get that out pretty quickly to 200 women of color on our platform, to help them as they were, a lot of brick and mortar businesses were building their outdoor spaces or needing to pivot in all of the different ways that we pivoted through 2020. So capital through our grant partners, absolutely. Also access to kind of weekly programming where they're able to connect with each other and meet other women inside and outside of their sector, share resources, share insights. And then there is accelerator programs that we run. So right now we are doing the Dreams to Reality Fund program with Caress, where we're taking a cohort of 75 entrepreneurs through the IFundWomen method to prep, launch, and execute successful crowdfunding campaigns, with Caress being the first funder of their campaign with a $1,000 grant. And excited to share that this week we are gonna have all of the campaigns launched on the platform.
Amazing.
Which is, it's exciting to see all of their work come to fruition. They've been going through this cohort experience, so they've really been able to lean on each other and leverage IFundWomen's one-on-one coaching that we offer, and the community support. So our main thing is capital, coaching, connections at IFundWomen. And I think when it comes to women of color, it's just a little more nuanced, and there are different barriers that stand in the way of us being able to access those resources. And so I don't necessarily think it's about creating completely different resources, but it's like making it accessible in a way where women of color feel like they were considered in the creation of platforms, of tools, or whatever it is. And proud to share that in our first year, we were able to move the needle on our cumulative funding volume. Over the past 4 years, women of color now represent 51% of the funds raised on our platform. And so again, just goes to show that it's not if you build it, they will come. It really is like, understand the nuances that exist and then create solutions that bridge the gap to make these tools accessible to women of color.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's understanding the context behind that. And women in general is just not a monolith. We can't just be talking about white women. We have to understand that women of color need different resources as well, not hugely different. But I think, again, just bringing in those different barriers, as you mentioned, and understanding the nuanced experience is super important. And you mentioned coaching and community. And part of that is really giving and receiving feedback, which is sometimes hard to do, especially around your business ideas and around people that you like really build relationships with. In your experience, how do you give really beneficial, constructive feedback that's not, I love your idea, or I would never, how do you give that constructive messaging to fellow co-founders?
I think it is a lot of the environment that you create. If you're stepping into an environment where it seems like, again, that scarcity piece, it's like, well, it's either you or her. So who's gonna get it? Versus we're all here to see each other win. And in order to do that, you need that outside perspective. And I think that we've really cultivated a platform where getting somebody else's perspective on your business is a massive win. And I think as an entrepreneur, as a solo entrepreneur, you can only get your friends and family to care for so long about your elevator pitch. Like they'll listen to it so many times, but other founders who understand like how important it is to nail it and get those that right language and draw people in, it really is more of an exciting opportunity to get other people's eyes on this thing that you're working really hard on. And I think that's just embedded in kind of the environment that we've created at IFundWomen. And I think there's also something to be said about being celebratory. I think this is something that I've learned from IFundWomen's founder and CEO, Karen Khan. Since day one, it's always been about highlighting people for the work that they do, calling out like what went into this thing, and not just letting something pass without recognizing what a big win or a small win or whatever it is. And so in our Wednesday sessions with IFundWomen of Color, we're sharing wins and we're sharing challenges, because I think it also can be hard to look back at the week and say, well, did I even have a win? And it's like, yes, you always had something in there. It's just about finding it. And so I would say when it comes to the actual giving of the feedback, it's assume best intentions by putting yourself into an environment where that's the way that it's run. And then empathy, always in all things, and understand, like stating, well, this is why I think what I think. This is my background. This is my experience. This is where this is coming from, not from a judgmental place, but a outside perspective that maybe you never considered.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely what I hear from you as well is just not coming at it from that scarcity mindset, but rather a mindset of abundance. And also, I think a lot of us, especially as women and founders, are just like, it's easy to identify the challenges, but celebrating the small, medium, and large wins is super important to the process as well. I know you mentioned earlier, just pivoting to different resources for COVID relief. You founded IFundWomen of Color in January 2020, which seems like many years ago. How did the pandemic really impact IFundWomen of Color as well?
Yeah, so I would say we essentially became an essential service for women entrepreneurs who were trying to figure out what survival looked like through this. And so we saw many entrepreneurs turn to crowdfunding in those moments, whether they needed to cover costs, whether they needed to completely pivot or they needed to move to a new location, whatever it was. So it was a lot of coaching through the pivots, being a space where you can cry if you need to, because it's hard. And like, you need to have those spaces. And I think even for businesses who had a decent amount of success last year from kind of the Black owned by Black movement and all of that created its own kind of challenges for like, I've never had to manage this type of demand before. And so for somebody who's consistently being celebrated and the external, creating a space where she can come and be like, yeah, like this is great, but also it's really hard. And this is something I've never done before. It was just a whole lot of vulnerable conversations, strategy, pivoting, and it really only further proved out why a platform like IFundWomen of Color is necessary when you're trying to navigate your business and speak out on what you believe in, but like wonder if it's going to lose you customers, and like how much of my business can be my identity and what I stand for versus separating
Yeah.
my business from it. It was like we had a space to have those types of conversations, and I think that was really important. And I think the other piece of it is something that I'm hyper aware of is not only are women not a monolith, neither are women of color. And
Right.
so really deeply understanding the nuances of the experiences between the different communities inside of our platform as well, is really something that I'm focused on this year, because I don't think we need to be waiting for another tragedy to happen to another group before we decide to put money and support and awareness on the challenges that these entrepreneurs face. So that's kind of like what we went through with the pandemic, and where we're focused now in terms of how we want to continue to make an impact.
Absolutely. There's definitely an opportunity for businesses, as well as just different essential resources as well, like IFundWomen of Color, to think proactively about these strategies. And that's a conversation, especially what you mentioned in terms of identity in the workplace and speaking out on what you believe in, how much of it as a founder and a CEO as well should you be putting into this as well, is definitely something interesting that we're seeing too in these conversations. I want to go back to kind of the big wins too in terms of a success story. I'm sure that there are many for IFundWomen of Color, but can you share one of them with our listeners in terms of the tools and resources for one of the businesses you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my personal favorites is an entrepreneur based in Philly. Her name's Shannon Maldonado. She's the founder of Yowie, which is a retail space. And during the pandemic, she, for a while now, has had this kind of vision for dynamic retail, a space where you can shop, play, collaborate, stay all in one experience. And she was a little hesitant to crowdfund, particularly in the midst of pandemic,
Yep.
to be making that ask. But as a business, you need to continue to innovate, to continue to grow. And so she received the $2,500 grant from Caress, which ultimately kind of started her crowdfunding campaign, and having a brand like Caress say, hey, we believe in what you're doing. We believe that this needs to exist in the world, is that kind of like confidence boost to say that, okay, I could do this. And then Shannon in her own right went on to raise $75K
That's
on top of that.
amazing.
And so what I loved about her campaign was, and what we coach our entrepreneurs, it's tactical, practical. She needed $75,000 to be able to make her first hire towards moving this space forward. But the story that she was telling, and the story that you tell to get people excited about what you're doing, people don't necessarily get excited about you needing to hire somebody, but she was able to prove out demand for this vision. Is this something that other people want to see in the world? And not only do they want to just see it in the world, are they willing to pay for it? That's the genius of crowdfunding. It allows you to prove demand before you invest in supply. And so super excited about the work that Shannon's doing. If you're in Philly ever, definitely check out the shop. She has some amazing goodies in there that you can grab, and her like creative eye is unbelievable.
That's amazing. I'm definitely going to check it out after this as well. I have a friend who lives in Philly, so I will direct her there
Yes.
too. That's an interesting point that you bring up as well, because I think there was these both feelings, especially as we were learning more about the global pandemic that we are in, that folks are really focusing on investing in local communities, but also I would imagine that entrepreneurs and founders of companies are a little hesitant to ask for money when all of this is going on. Was that a conversation that you were having with a lot of your founders?
That was the conversation
Yeah.
wholly. It was like, how do I make the ask? And that's the main conversation that we have in general. We did some research with Caress on the state of women of color in businesses, and the majority of women of color said they weren't comfortable with crowdfunding, and which is proving out what we knew and why we launched IFundWomen of Color, because there's a lot of misconceptions around it. it's not about asking for charity or donations for your business. The type of crowdfunding that we do is truly just a marketing and sales exercise. So it's about selling products, services, content, experiences in exchange for cash for your business. There's an exchange of value. And so it's not just like, hey, if you could donate $50 to my business, it's, hey, I know you mentioned that you're getting your business off the ground. Social media isn't a strong point for you. I'm doing $50 social media audits through my campaign. It would mean a lot if you could support, and I'd be happy to help you on your end. It's that exchange of value that just changes the conversation and makes the ask much easier because it's grounded in value that you're looking to provide.
Yeah, I think that piece of grounded in value is super important, because I think a lot of people do believe that they're asking for money just for them, or just like they're asking for a personal favor. But at the end of the day, it is a business. And I would argue, I don't know the research that is out there specifically, but men definitely wouldn't have that, large hesitation as women of color do about asking for money for their business. So I think it's a different mindset. And crowdfunding is one of the many options that there are out there for early stage startups to acquire funding. We've talked a little bit about this, but how do you know if it's the right avenue for you as a founder?
It's interesting because I think there's just so much flexibility that exists with crowdfunding, no matter where you are in your business. We firmly believe that it should be the first stop on your funding journey, again, to prove demand before you invest in supply. We know that the majority of startups fail. So like, fail fast, fail cheap. Put your idea out there. If there's traction, keep moving with it. But if not, pivot and adjust. We're very comfortable with talking about failure at IFundWomen because it's part of the game, and it's something that we have to get comfortable with. But I think when you're having that conversation with women of color, it's like, oftentimes we don't have the luxury to fail. And so there's additional nuance there. But I think that crowdfunding is a low risk, debt-free funding source to help you get over the obstacle that's in front of you right now. It won't necessarily fund the next 5 years of your business, but it can help you move forward on your journey, whether it's building out your MVP, manufacturing the first line of your product, or opening a space. It's a way to do those kind of steps along the journey. And it's something that you can do multiple times. We've had people crowdfund multiple times for their businesses. We had a founder who first raised, I think it was like maybe $15,000 for a summer dance camp for people with special needs. And then she came back and raised $100K to open a studio because there's so much demand for the dance camp. So I think it is much more about figuring out, what am I trying to accomplish and how can I use crowdfunding to do it, as opposed to like, is crowdfunding right for me? Because it can be used in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important point to highlight as well. And especially that financial barrier to starting a business and investing all of your savings and then figuring out there's no demand for it is definitely not what you want to do as well. So fail fast, fail cheap. I like that saying. And you spoke about kind of the financial empowerment piece tied to women's rights at the Women's March in New York in 2020, and shared in a blog that it was the first time ever that financial empowerment was joined with the broader conversation around women's rights at the Women's March. Can you talk a little bit more about how you see the broader kind of financial empowerment related to this kind of movement?
Absolutely. I mean, very simply, money is power. That is how things happen. That's how we make movement. And without the necessary capital to get our businesses off the ground, we're limited on the impact that we are able to have on the economy and on our human experience. I think many of the products and services that the women of color on our platform are creating are solving problems that we have that have not been considered in the products and services that were created by people who don't look like us. And so until we can actually start making money off of these things that we're creating that we need to exist, but the people with the money don't share our experience, so they don't necessarily understand the value, it's just going to continue to be this standstill. And we see it play out with so many of the kind of societal issues that we face that truly are systemic. It's like, unless capital is put into this thing, we're not going to see the impact that we need to see actual change, as opposed to just throwing money at marketing campaign and saying nice words. It's like we have to go so much deeper than that if we want to actually see systemic change.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. And I think for the corporate social justice movement and like CSR as well, a lot of companies do want to put their money where their mouth is and say nice words in company statements and also donate and also support women of color owned businesses. And I know we've talked about Crest and you partnered with American Express to recognize the importance of women entrepreneurs and how like to evaluate their commitment. How do you really think about, KPIs in terms of who you partner with, if they're actually committed to doing the work with a capital W, or if they're just like, I want to partner with IFundWomen or IFundWomen of Color because it will look nice on social media?
Yeah. Get this question often, and our our enterprise partnerships have been an unbelievable way to supercharge the capital being raised on our platform. The program that we did with American Express was part of their larger $1 billion pledge to support racial, ethnic, and gender equity, both internally and externally.
Right.
And I think we will continue to see this type of action-driven brand marketing because more and more consumers are being thoughtful about where they're spending their dollars, and they want to know that the companies that they're spending money with are not just talking the talk, but also walking the walk. And in terms of what authentic support looks like, I mean, I think the first step is admitting what you don't know and what you don't understand. It's like, okay, so I want to support this thing, but I don't want to just copy paste what we've done before. I want to actually understand the needs. And I think that AMX really did a great job of saying, we want to create impact, help us understand what the best way to do that is. And we also know that the average annual revenue of a Black woman-owned business is $24,000. So for American Express to invest $25,000 into 100 Black women-owned businesses on our platform, that's life-changing money for them. And they deposited it into their existing crowdfunding campaign. So they didn't have to go through all the hoops of applying and all the different barriers that exist. They were like, no, we want to just connect us with the women and tell us what is needed and what will be effective and impactful to create the impact that we want to see. And so I think that it's that listening piece that's really key, and being willing to understand that it might take more capital than you were originally thinking, but also understanding that the barriers and like, can we cut through some of those? Like, there are so many different areas on both ends where we can make it easier to get the capital into the hands of women of color.
Yeah, absolutely. I think acknowledging that nobody has all of the answers is really important, in evaluating what you want your impact to be and the resources that a company has at their disposal is really important, and partnering with organizations who are subject matter experts in the space and know where the money should go is important too. So I like that, and just listening in general to people makes for a more effective long-term strategy as well, instead of a one and done. We supported, and it's a long-term commitment. What is one of the kind of trends you're seeing in the startup and innovation world that companies or individuals, whether it's founders or someone who's thinking about being a founder, need to be aware of in order to be successful in the future of work?
So I really think it is about building community first. I think the reason IFundWomen of Color has been successful is because we already had the women of color on our platform. And instead of guessing what they needed, we just asked them. Like, nothing that I create was created without our community telling me that they needed it. And I think that makes for a much more productive experience on both ends, because you're spending your time creating things that are actually going to drive value. And then your community feels like they're actually having a say in kind of what's being created. And I think outside of the lens of IFundWomen of Color, just when you're building a business, I heard somebody say one time, like, if you can't find your customers before your product exists, they're not just going to materialize after your product exists. And I think it's so true. And a lot of I do the community building coaching call at IFundWomen. And that's really the conversation that we have. It's like, where are your customers already spending their time and how can you meet them there? And if you can't answer that question, you shouldn't be investing money into the product or service yet. Like, you really want to understand what are the pain points, what are the things that they're not getting from other places, so that the solution that you create is with that in mind, as opposed to like having this clear thing of like, I want to create this thing, but not actually know if people want it. And then that way also, when you do inevitably pivot, which happens in business, your community is going to continue to come with you, because they weren't there for the product or service that you created. They were there because they believe in your ethos, what you're trying to put out into the world, and want to help you do that no matter the way the solution comes to life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue that the people who donate to your crowdfunding campaign, or, if they donate to you from the friends and family, or however they donate the money, and there's no MVP or product, they are investing in you and your vision and what you are putting out into the world as well. So I think that's also really important too, in terms of, I know we talked about this as well, but just investing in MVP, and nobody is interested in purchasing it or the service as well. So I think that definitely makes sense. Pivoting a little bit to you, is there anything that folks would be surprised to know about you? I know a lot of your experience is on the internet, but I just wanted to ask that as well.
Yeah, so I think a fun little fact is my mom actually crowdfunded on IFundWomen for her business, which is how I initially found out about it. She was able to raise $30,000 for her company. And so I've firsthand seen how our platform works. I watched her build this business for nearly my entire life. I watched her pitch at pitch competitions to white men who didn't understand why a service that helps educate Black women on how to build wealth by investing their money matters, and why do we just need to focus on Black women or women of color, those exact conversations. So to see her be able to leverage crowdfunding and that really be kind of a jump start in a business that she had been working on for many years, seeing that firsthand is powerful. And then being able to get to work with women just like her every day and help them kind of have those breakthroughs, avoid those kind of pitfalls that first time entrepreneurs face because we don't know what we don't know. It just makes the work even more rewarding. So I think that's always a little fun fact.
Yay, Mom, that's amazing. I think that's great. And that's really amazing that she was able to raise that amount of money via crowdfunding and just really get the business going. Also, is there a paper by your microphone or something? There's like a rustling in the background. I just wanted to.
There isn't, but it might be my shirt.
Oh, okay. Okay. All good. I just wanted to ask. It was just for that last question. But I know that we talked about a bunch of different topics today, but always like to ask at the kind of end of our time together, if there's anything else you would like to share that I didn't ask, or if there's a point you'd like to reemphasize as a key takeaway for our listeners.
I think the piece that I would just like to reiterate is, don't overthink the solution. With IFundWomen of Color, we really just said we want to do something about it. We'll perfect it along the way. It's by no means perfect today, but the fact that in a year we were able to drive that much impact just goes to show that like perfect is the enemy of done. Get something out there and then iterate from that point. Don't get caught up on it's not perfect, it's not ready yet, I don't have everything together. Just get it out there, and I think the more that we do that, the more opportunity that's gonna come to us, because again, we're not cutting ourselves out before we even get in the game.
Yeah, negotiating with yourself before you're actually negotiating with other people or just talking to them about your idea. And I think that's right for a lot of things. Perfect is the enemy of being done. So I love that. Olivia, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture. It was really nice to meet and speak with you today.
Thanks for having me. Great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a reminder for our listeners, AllVoices believes in the empowerment of all employees to speak up at an organization and thinks it's a requirement in order for folks to succeed. We'll speak soon.